Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes and along with that, changes everything. iPod was one of them. The iPod played a very significant role in Apple's history.
Boom. That's iPod. I happen to have one right here in my pocket, matter of fact. There it is, right there.
It was introduced in 2001 and completely changed the way people thought about music players since then. Hey, DEBRAJ Pathak this side, and if you are interested about tech topics, make sure you subscribe this channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified as and when we update a video. Apple got involved with digital music in 1999, but before I get into that, I want to point out Apple was a much different company back then. They just were narrowly escaped bankruptcy and was under tremendous pressure to generate revenues for their shareholders. And their biggest moneymaker was Mac. In fact, they didn't make anything else apart from Mac computers and had no experience making handheld devices like MP3 player. So with Apple in this extremely stressful and tight financial position, you wouldn't expect them to take a big risk and essentially bet part the company on new category of devices. But Steve Jobs at the helm, that's exactly what they did. They went from popular yet frustrating cheap plastic made MP3 players of mid-90s, which could hold probably 20 to 30 songs, to a beautifully designed devices and delightful to use and could hold thousands of songs. iPod began experiencing incredible sales success with their iPod mini, which was launched in the year 2004 and sold for $250. Apple then replaced iPod mini with Nano in 2005, which became even more affordable at just $150. Now people who were in their 20s, you probably remember how popular the iPod was among school and college goers back then. It seemed like everybody had or wanted to have, despite very few people had a Mac or even were not familiar with the Apple as a brand. But because of the iPod success, something called halo effect caused more and more people interested in other products Apple had to offer and paved the way for legendary iPhone success in 2007. Now I said all to demonstrate how important iPod was to Apple's overall success as a company. When a product has that much historical significance, companies typically find difficult to move to something else to replace it. It's why Kodak filed bankruptcy in 2012 as they couldn't move from traditional film to digital photography. Apple has always recognized the importance of replacing their own product with new ones. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So that's what exactly they did with iPod.
And an internet communicator, an iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
When Apple released the iPhone in 2007, they were not shy away telling their customers that iPhone has a built-in iPod, which actually signaled their customers you should not buy an iPod if you have a plan to buy an iPhone, which may sound like a bad business strategy to some business executives. But Apple knew they could convince the customers to buy iPhone if it had a high perceived value, and by marketing the best phone ever built and the best iPod ever made. Customers indeed were happy to hand over $500 what Apple demanded. Now, ever since the iPhone is around, the iPod sales on the decline, which exactly Apple has expected. So it didn't come much of a surprise when iPod Classic was discontinued in the year 2014, and the Nano and Shuffle were discontinued 2017. But what some people found odd that the lingering presence of iPod Touch, because it didn't receive any upgrade in last 4 years. Many expected it to be also discontinued, but now we know it isn't the case, as Apple has given an incremental upgrade to the iPod Touch in the last year. So what's special about iPod Touch which preventing it to be discontinued? After all, there are so many valid reasons you can give as to why the iPod Touch should no longer exist. One of the popular being everybody has a smartphone these days. According to Pew Research Center, 81% Americans have a smartphone as in 2019. And that number is part of the reasons why MP3 players and even point and shoot cameras have been made obsolete. With smartphone you can listen all the music you want from Apple Music or even an external application like Spotify, and you don't have to spend the extra time downloading the songs and transferring them to your device. So it's easy to see why a MP3 player like iPod is just be redundant and unnecessary for most of people today. It's also worth noting iPod making Apple much lesser money than ever before. They actually used to have their own category in the Apple's revenue report. But now iPod has been delegated to the wearables and home and accessories category, which contains products like Apple TV and HomePod. Now this category has been generating a large chunk of revenues for Apple in recent years, thanks to the success of iWatch and AirPods. But no one really knows how well iPod is selling, because Apple never mentioned in their reports. So we only assume its popularity is dwindling. Something I read a lot in forums discussing about iPod Touch is how outdated the technology is. Its form factor hasn't been updated since 2012. It's using the same display as the iPhone 5, and its processor, despite the upgrade, is still going on 3 years old. So why would Apple, a company who pride themselves being at the forefront of technological innovations, want to retain aging products like iPod Touch around? I'll tell you exactly why. But before that, I want to point out a unique quality about iPod Touch, which often overlooked. And that is, it's one of the only product which has not been touched by Apple's price hikes. iPod Touch starts at $200, which is the same price point as it was in 2012. If iPhone also priced similarly, the flagship model would have cost $650 instead $1,000 today. It's important to understand since it proves Apple intentionally trying to retain iPod price as affordable as possible. And something maybe you'll be asking yourself, why iPod Touch? Why Apple wouldn't continue to sell other iPod models like Nano or Classic? And the answer has everything to do with iOS. All Classic, Nano and Shuffle has their own operating system, specifically designed for them. And while it was okay with the customers, it wasn't a good business strategy for Apple. Because when your most popular and profitable product, the iPhone, running iOS, you want everybody to get familiar with this operating system, so that it's more likely they will be buying an iPhone in the future. And by discontinuing Classic, Nano and Shuffle, they literally forced everybody, if you want to buy an iPod, you have to buy iPod Touch, and drawing them part of this iOS ecosystem, and therefore increasing the likelihood of them choosing iPhone whenever they plan to buy a smartphone later on. And this type of long-term approach to business is very characteristic of Apple. They always been much more concerned about the lifetime value of a customer instead of a single transaction. That's why in Apple stores, they don't try to upsell you or make a commission out of that, because their primary purpose is trying to find out the best product as per your circumstance, so that you come back in few years whenever you have a need of a phone or a notebook. So the iPod Touch is the only affordable iOS device and the only iPod ever run iOS, which makes ideal for many unique customers like, for example, children. Most of young kids use an intermediate device like iPad or iPod before they are old enough to have a smartphone.
Buy this new iPod for only $70 and 1 cent.
And if you know anything about marketing, is that children are the best customers. They beg their parents for the product they want, and they're typically loyal to their family brands at their teenage years. So if Apple can get an iOS device in the hand of young kids as early as possible, it's more likely to pay off in long run, since they're likely to choose the iPhone as their first smartphone, and perhaps when MacBook and Apple Watch as they get entrenched to the Apple ecosystem. So you can see why Apple is not that concerned is iPod Touch is making them a lot of money today or not, and they are more focused about the long-term customers. But isn't only the children are the ideal iPod customers. It's also a great product for markets like India and China, where iPhones considered too expensive. And the another reason of keeping the iPod Touch around, its use in the commercial settings. I have actually been in restaurants where waitstaffs have taken the order in the iPod Touch, instead writing it down to a notepad. And I'm confident there are countless examples where iPod Touch has been used in similar business situations. But perhaps the most popular way the iPod Touch has been used today as a dedicated music player. Because the vast majority of people owning a smartphone today, there are those who prefers to have a dedicated device for listening music. In fact, when the iPod Classic was discontinued in 2014, its resale price on eBay skyrocketed to $1,000, demonstrating that how much demand there is still for iPods. So clearly there are good reasons to Apple to keep the iPod Touch around for time being at least, although its future remains uncertain. So let me know what you think about it in the comment section, and subscribe this channel and hit the bell icon for future updates, and I'll see you in my next video.